I'd poured $50,000 into my parents' 40th anniversary gala. Their thank you? Lena, dear, you're at the little table with the toddlers. My mother's voice dripped with false sweetness. I just smiled, left, and by midnight, their frantic calls began. They had no idea I knew their darkest financial secret, and I was about to change their lives forever. The familiar tightness in my chest. It always appeared when a major family event loomed. Part hope, part dread, a cocktail I'd been sipping for years, telling myself each time that this occasion would be different. That this time, they'd finally see me, Lena, their 32-year-old daughter, successful in her own right as an architect, not just the convenient, unmarried younger child expected to fill whatever gap presented itself. My mother, Eleanor, was the grand conductor of our family orchestra, and her baton was often tipped with a subtle, almost invisible barb. She was a woman who thrived on appearances, on the meticulously curated image of a perfect, prosperous family. Her pronouncements were law, her sighs a condemnation. "Oh, Lena, darling, are you sure you want to do it that way?" She'd murmur, a feathery touch on my arm, her brow furrowed with perfectly feigned concern that somehow always made my choices feel small, ill-considered. Her greatest fear, I suspected, wasn't failure itself, but the appearance of it, the tarnishing of the gleaming facade she'd spent a lifetime constructing. My father, David, was a softer presence, a man who'd long ago traded his own voice for the quietude of acquiescence. He loved me, I knew, in his own muted way, but his spine seemed to dissolve whenever Eleanor entered the room. "Lena, for the sake of peace, just go along with it. You know your mother," was his recurring refrain, a gentle plea that always left me feeling both understood and utterly alone. Then there was Chloe, my older sister, Eleanor's golden child. 38, married to a man who seemed perpetually on the verge of his next big break, and mother to two cherubic children who were often paraded as evidence of Chloe's superior life choices. Chloe wore her domesticity like a crown, often starting sentences with, "Well, as a mother of two, I can tell you," designed to gently remind me of my own perceived deficiencies. Beneath the veneer of suburban bliss, however, I sensed a current of deep insecurity, a desperate need to outshine me, even if it was only in our parents' heavily biased eyes. She was, I knew, financially less stable than her lifestyle suggested, propped up by a steady, discreet flow of funds from our parents. My history with them was paved with sacrifices, large and small. The most significant, the one that still sat like a stone in my gut, was the family emergency fund. Years ago, when Grandma Jean passed, she left me a rather substantial inheritance. I was in my early 20s, just starting my career, and had dreams of a down payment on a small condo, perhaps some travel. But then came the hushed conversations, Eleanor's worried frowns, David's anxious pacing. The family home, their pride and joy, was apparently at risk due to some ill-advised investments of Dad's. So, my inheritance, all $75,000 of it, was rerouted into a newly established joint savings account, the Family Emergency Fund. I was a signatory, yes, but they assured me it was for joint family emergencies to help everyone. Over time, with my trust perhaps too readily given, their names became the primary ones on the account, and my scrutiny of its statements dwindled. It was easier not to look, not to question. And the smaller sacrifices? They were countless. Designing Chloe's extensive home extension for free, only to hear her tell friends, "Oh, this layout? It was just a little something I whipped up. You know how it is when inspiration strikes." Co-signing a car loan for her when her credit was shot, a loan I later discovered was largely being serviced by quiet withdrawals from that same family emergency fund, without so much as a "by your leave" to me. It was a tapestry woven with my generosity and their casual entitlement. Now, another grand occasion was upon us, my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Eleanor, naturally, was planning an extravagant gala at the Oakwood Country Club, the kind of event designed more for her social standing than for intimate celebration. The estimate for the ridiculous ice sculpture she insisted on felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the simmering resentment in my gut that I tried, as always, to swallow. One crisp October evening, Eleanor cornered me in the kitchen, her voice a gentle murmur. "Lena, darling," she began, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "About the anniversary, it's all adding up, you know." She sighed, a delicate, put-upon sound. "Chloe, bless her, is doing so much with the children and everything, and her resources are, well, you understand." A pause, heavy with unspoken meaning. "You, on the other hand, you're doing so wonderfully, and you have fewer encumbrances. A contribution, say, 10,000 for the catering. It would mean so much to your father and me. A true testament to your love and appreciation." The words, so carefully chosen, so expertly delivered, were a vice. $10,000. Separate from the fund, separate from the free design work I was already doing for the invitations and table settings. A knot formed in my stomach. I had savings, yes, but this was a significant sum. Yet, the old, familiar hope flickered. Maybe this time, this grand gesture would finally elicit the genuine recognition I craved. "Of course, Mom," I heard myself say, the words tasting like ash. "I'd be happy to." The following weeks were a blur of vendor calls, endless revisions to menu cards Eleanor couldn't quite decide on, and Chloe's occasional pronouncements about how I really needed to step up and make sure the event was perfect for Mom and Dad. The irony was a taste so bitter I could barely stand it. I felt like an investor pouring money into a failing business, hoping against hope for a turnaround that my gut told me would never come. The tightness in my chest became a constant companion. This time, I whispered to myself, it had to be different. It just had to be. The weeks leading up to the anniversary gala were a masterclass in Eleanor's subtle manipulations and Chloe's passive-aggressive superiority. I poured hours into designing the invitations, opting for a classic, elegant script on heavy cream cardstock, a design I thought exuded timelessness. Eleanor's feedback? "They're nice, Lena. A little stark, perhaps, but I'm sure they'll do." When I presented a vision board for the table centerpieces, low, lush arrangements of gardenias and white roses, Chloe, who had contributed nothing but opinions, remarked to our Aunt Carol, loud enough for me to hear, I had to gently guide Lena towards something more traditional. She has such modern ideas sometimes. I was standing right there, holding the very fabric swatches Eleanor had insisted upon only days before, the ones Chloe was now subtly disparaging. The casual erasure of my efforts, the constant, subtle chipping away at my confidence, was exhausting. One Saturday, while I was at their house finalizing details with a stressed-looking florist, I overheard Eleanor on the phone in the sunroom, her voice warm and expansive as she spoke to Mrs. Albright, a prominent figure in their social circle. "Oh, Agnes, you simply must come. It's going to be divine. Chloe has been an absolute rock, such an eye for elegance. She's really taken the lead on the aesthetics. I don't know what I'd do without her." Not a word about my $10,000 contribution. Not a whisper about the hours I'd spent ensuring every detail, from the font on the place cards to the specific shade of linen, was to Eleanor's exacting standards. I was, it seemed, the silent, invisible engine room of their grand affair. The evening of the gala arrived, a crisp November night. I'd chosen a deep sapphire gown, something understated yet elegant. As I drove to the Oakwood Country Club, a fragile optimism fluttered within me. The club was already glittering, a symphony of crystal chandeliers and muted conversations. I saw my parents near the entrance, Eleanor resplendent in a silver sequin dress, David looking distinguished, if slightly harried, in his tuxedo. I approached them, a small, tastefully wrapped gift in my hand, a first edition of a poetry book David had once mentioned loving. Before I could even offer my greetings, Eleanor turned, her smile overly bright, almost brittle. "Lena, darling, so glad you made it." Her eyes scanned my dress with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Then, with a gesture towards a small, rather forlorn-looking table situated uncomfortably close to the bustling service entrance and somewhat isolated from the main cluster of elegantly set round tables, she delivered the line. "We've saved a special seat for you, over at the little table with the toddlers and young cousins." You're so wonderful with them, and it keeps them contained and out from underfoot during the speeches." The words, sugar-coated as they were, felt like shards of ice lodging in my chest. The warmth I'd felt moments before bled out, leaving me cold and exposed under the glittering chandeliers. The little table. It was set with cheerful, but decidedly less formal, paper napkins and a collection of mismatched, smaller chairs. My gaze flickered to the main tables, adorned with gleaming silverware, crystal glasses, and the lush floral arrangements I had helped design. There, Chloe was already seated, holding court with her husband and some of their friends, a smug, knowing look passing between her and her mother that I didn't miss. Just then, Mrs. Albright, the very woman Eleanor had been boasting to on the phone, passed by on her way to greet another guest. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second as she took in the scene, me, being directed towards the children's enclave. I saw it clearly, a brief, unmistakable flicker of pity in her gaze before she quickly looked away. That silent, public acknowledgement of my humiliation from a virtual stranger somehow twisted the knife deeper than any direct insult could have. As if on cue, Chloe glided over, her silver dress shimmering. She patted my shoulder with a condescending little flourish. "Don't worry, sweetie," she cooed, her voice syrupy sweet. "Keeping the little ones entertained is a real contribution. Someone has to do it. And you're so maternal in your own way." Maternal. I was 32. I had designed buildings. I had managed million-dollar projects. And here I was, being praised for my potential as an unpaid babysitter at my own parents' anniversary party, a party I had significantly funded. The shock was swiftly followed by a burning wave of clarity. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated statement of my worth in their eyes. I wasn't, always would be, secondary. A strange calm settled over me. The years of simmering resentment, of swallowed slights, coalesced into a single, hard point of resolve. I smiled thinly, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "How thoughtful, Mother," I said, my voice surprisingly even. I walked towards the indicated table. My 7-year-old niece, Lily, Chloe's youngest, looked up at me with wide, expectant eyes. I leaned down, ignoring the curious stares of the few other young children. "This party needs a real princess," I whispered, pressing a crisp $50 bill into her small hand. "You are it. Enjoy every moment, and have an extra slice of cake for me." Lily giggled, her eyes shining. I straightened up, didn't look back at my mother or Chloe, didn't scan the room for my father's inevitable discomfort. I walked calmly, deliberately, to the coat check, retrieved my wrap, and without a single word or backward glance, I walked out of the Oakwood Country Club and into the cool night air. The strains of a string quartet faded behind me. As I reached my car, my phone began to buzz. A text from Chloe. "Seriously, Lena? Way to make a scene. So typical." Then a call from Eleanor. I let go to voicemail. Then David. Ignored. The engine purred to life, and I drove, not to my quiet, empty apartment, but towards the one place I knew I'd find sanity and an unvarnished opinion, my best friend Sarah's apartment. The battle, I sensed, had only just begun, but for the first time, I felt like I might actually be ready to fight on my own terms. Sarah lived in a cozy, book-filled apartment downtown. She was a corporate lawyer, sharp as a tack, with a no-nonsense attitude that had been my anchor more times than I could count. I must have looked like a wraith when she opened the door, because her usually teasing smile vanished. "Lena? What on earth happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse, Sarah," I said, sinking onto her plush sofa. "I've seen my family." As the story of the gala, the kids' table, Chloe's smirk, and Mrs. Albright's pitying glance tumbled out, Sarah's expression shifted from concern to a quiet, simmering fury on my behalf. She refilled my wine glass, her own eyes narrowed in thought. "This isn't just rude, Lena," she said finally, her voice firm. "This is a calculated pattern of emotional and, I suspect, financial abuse. That family emergency fund you told me about years ago, the one you funded with your entire inheritance from Grandma Jean. When was the last time you really looked at the statements for that?" Her question hung in the air. Guiltily, I admitted it had been years. I trusted them. I'd wanted to trust them. The account was online, of course. With a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, I pulled out my laptop. Sarah sat beside me, a silent, supportive presence, as I navigated to the bank's website, my fingers fumbling slightly as I typed in the login details I hadn't used in ages. The page loaded, and then I saw it. It was far, far worse than I could have ever imagined. The statement history was a chronicle of my family's deceptions. Regular, significant withdrawals made solely by my parents over the past decade. $5,000 here for a minor roof repair that coincided with Chloe's lavish 40th birthday trip to Napa. $10,000 there for an emergency plumbing issue that curiously aligned with the down payment on David's new luxury SUV. Smaller, but frequent, transfers to Chloe's personal account, vaguely labeled living expenses. My $75,000 inheritance, the money meant for joint family emergencies, had been systematically plundered, treated as their personal slush fund. The recent, minimal contributions they'd made themselves were dwarfed by the sheer scale of what they'd taken from me. The $10,000 I'd just handed over for this disastrous anniversary party felt like the ultimate insult, a final fleecing. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just about being unappreciated. This was about being methodically exploited, my trust used as a weapon against me. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice calm but steely, cutting through my shock. "Don't just get angry, Lena. Get strategic." Over the next hour, guided by her incisive legal mind, I didn't just rage. I meticulously downloaded every statement from the past 10 years. I highlighted suspicious transactions, cross-referencing dates with family events and Chloe's known expenditures. I took screenshots, saved everything to a secure cloud drive, and even emailed a summarized list of the most egregious withdrawals to Sarah for her records. The evidence was damning. The next morning, my phone, which I'd put on silent, was a cacophony of missed calls and increasingly agitated texts from Eleanor, David, and Chloe. I ignored them. Around noon, an unexpected call came through from my young cousin, James, one of Chloe's older boys, now 19. He sounded hesitant, uncomfortable. "Lena? It's James. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry about last night. It wasn't right." Then his voice dropped lower. "And I overheard Mom talking to Grandma Eleanor after you left. Chloe was, well, she was kind of laughing. She said, 'Good, now she knows her place. And we can use her $10,000 party money for Dad's new golf club membership, since she didn't even eat dinner.' Grandma didn't say anything to stop her. I thought you should know." His words, though painful, were a cold, clarifying slap. It wasn't just opportunistic greed. It was premeditated, callous, and utterly dismissive of me as a person. Any lingering wisps of doubt I might have harbored about their intentions evaporated. Later that afternoon, another call, this one from a number I vaguely recognized. It was Mr. Henderson, an old friend of my father's, a respected figure in their community, and someone I'd always known to be a man of integrity. He'd been at the Gala. "Lena, my dear," his kind, gravelly voice began, "I hope you don't mind my calling. I saw you leave last night, and I must say, what your mother did was inexcusable." He paused. "I've known Eleanor a long time. Years ago, she pulled a similar stunt, though for different reasons, to exclude David's own sister from a crucial family discussion about their parents' estate. David wasn't always this passive, Lena. Your mother's influence has been significant." He didn't elaborate further, but he didn't need to. His words painted a clear picture of a long-standing pattern, validating my experience and making me realize the dysfunction was far deeper and more entrenched than I had ever allowed myself to believe. He also subtly implied that Eleanor's carefully constructed social standing was more fragile than she imagined and wouldn't easily withstand public scrutiny of her private actions. Armed with irrefutable evidence, the validation of an outside observer, and a newfound, icy resolve, I knew what I had to do. Sarah had briefly walked me through the potential complexities of joint accounts, but also affirmed that given the clear origin of the initial funds, my inheritance, and the pattern of unauthorized, non-emergency usage, I had a strong ethical and likely defensible claim to claw back at least a portion of what was mine. I logged back into the bank account. I calculated the $10,000 I'd given for the party plus another $5,000, the exact amount of one particularly blatant withdrawal labeled Chloe, personal shopping trip. $15,000. With steady hands, I initiated the transfer from the now-depleted family emergency fund to my personal savings account. I left a paltry, almost insulting sum of $17.31 in the joint account. I then updated the account settings to ensure all future transaction notifications and statements were directed to both my parents' primary email addresses. Let them see it. Let them wonder. Then, I drafted a very calm, very factual email. Subject: regarding the 40th anniversary celebration and family emergency fund. To Eleanor, David, CC, Chloe. Dear Mother, Father, and Chloe, following the events of last night's 40th anniversary celebration, I have adjusted my financial contribution to reflect my actual level of participation and welcome. Furthermore, I have taken necessary steps to secure my initial capital investment in the Family Emergency Fund from further unauthorized, non-emergency expenditures. I trust this clarifies my position. I attached no statements, no proof. Not yet. I simply hit send. The ball was now in their court, and I had a feeling the game was about to get very, very interesting. The email detonated with the force I'd anticipated. It took less than an hour for the first frantic call to come through. Eleanor, her voice no longer saccharine but shrill with disbelief and fury. I let it go to voicemail. Then David, his tone a mixture of panic and bewilderment. Then Chloe, spitting venom. I listened to none of them. I knew what was coming next. Sure enough, 2 hours later, a furious pounding on my apartment door. I glanced through the peephole. Eleanor, David, and Chloe, a united front of indignation. I'd anticipated this too. Sarah, bless her pragmatic soul, was already there, having come over with a folder of neatly printed bank statements and a calm, lawyerly demeanor. I opened the door. How dare you? Eleanor began, her face contorted. You steal from us. After everything we've done for you. That was our money. I stepped back, allowing them into the small foyer, Sarah a silent, watchful presence just behind me. Mother, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremor I felt internally. I haven't stolen anything. I've merely reclaimed a portion of my inheritance and my recent gift, funds that were being systematically misused. We can discuss the detailed statements if you like. I have them right here. I gestured coolly to the folder Sarah was holding. Chloe lunged forward verbally. You're just jealous. Jealous of my family, my happiness, everything you don't have. Chloe, I replied, meeting her glare. My only concern here is financial integrity and the blatant misuse of funds I entrusted to this family for emergencies. Perhaps you can explain these itemized withdrawals for your business ventures and shopping sprees that seem to have originated from an account I established with my grandmother's legacy. David, looking genuinely distressed, tried a different tack. Lena, pumpkin, please, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Don't do this to the family. Think of your mother's health. This will destroy us. Father, I said, and for the first time, a note of the deep, old pain crept into my voice. I have thought about this family for years. I've also, finally, thought about my own financial health and my self-respect. Two things that seem to have been consistently overlooked and undervalued in this dynamic. They tried everything, gaslighting. You're misinterpreting those statements. It was all for legitimate family needs, guilt-tripping. How could you be so cold, so ungrateful? Threats. We'll tell everyone what you've done. But for every accusation, I, with Sarah's occasional quiet interjection, clarifying a point of financial movement, had a calm, factual response. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't weep. I simply stood my ground, armed with the undeniable truth of their actions. Eventually, realizing they were making no headway against this new, resolute Lena, they left, not in a storm of fury, but in a kind of dazed, sputtering defeat. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The days that followed were quiet, a strange, unnerving calm after the storm. The call stopped. Then, about a week later, a letter arrived, handwritten by my father. It was rambling, full of justifications and weak apologies. "I'm sorry, Pumpkin," one line read. "It all just got out of hand over the years. Your mother, she just wants what's best in her own way." I acknowledged it with a brief, polite email, thanking him for his letter, but offering no absolution. He hadn't really taken responsibility, merely lamented the consequences. The real fallout, however, was beginning to ripple outwards. Mr. Henderson, true to his character, didn't gossip, but he did, I later heard, express his disappointment to a few key figures in their social circle about the unfortunate way young Lena was treated at what should have been a joyous family occasion. Eleanor's carefully constructed image as the perfect hostess and matriarch began to show hairline cracks. The whispers started. Chloe, I heard through James, was having a particularly rough time. Her husband, apparently confronted with some of Sarah's discreetly forwarded and heavily redacted to protect my full strategy, evidence of Chloe's financial dependence on the misused family fund, was asking difficult questions. Their supposedly perfect marriage was showing strain. The loss of an easy financial tap was clearly more than just an inconvenience for her. As for me, I felt a profound, aching sadness for the family I wished I'd had, the one I'd kept trying to create through sacrifice and submission. But beneath the sadness, a new, stronger foundation was being laid, one of self-respect and quiet empowerment. I invested the reclaimed $15,000 into my own small business, a tangible symbol of my independence. I drafted one final communication to my parents and Chloe, a letter this time, reviewed by Sarah. It was clear, concise, and devoid of accusation, focusing instead on my future needs. I stated that any future relationship, if there was to be one, would require a foundation of mutual respect, honesty, and a genuine acknowledgement of past wrongs. Perhaps even family therapy, though I held out little hope they'd ever agree. I then limited contact, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The following Thanksgiving, I didn't wait for an invitation that might never come, or one that came with strings attached. I hosted a small, intimate dinner in my own apartment. Sarah was there, of course, along with James, who was now questioning many things about his own family's dynamics. Mr. Henderson also accepted my invitation, bringing a bottle of excellent wine and stories that made us all laugh. The food was simple, but made with love and shared in an atmosphere of genuine warmth. There were no assigned seats, only welcome ones. The laughter was easy, unforced. The silence from my immediate family, the one that used to be a weapon they wielded to bring me to heel, no longer held that power. Now, it was a space, a quiet territory that I could fill with my own peace, my own choices, my own terms. Breaking free hadn't just been about reclaiming money. It had been about reclaiming my voice, my value, my life. They had tried to relegate me to the children's table, a symbol of my perceived insignificance. But in walking away, in standing up for myself, I learned that I could build my own banquet hall, and from now on, I alone would decide who deserved a seat. This journey, this painful severing and rebuilding, was about drawing lines in the sand, even when that sand was the supposedly sacred ground of family. It was the hardest decision of my life, but in the quiet moments when I looked around at the life I was now intentionally crafting, I knew with a certainty that resonated deep in my bones that it was also the most liberating.